Welcome everyone. For those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I'm Lale Welsh, the CEO of NDF. Some of you here will remember a time when it was just me and maybe an intern. And so I just really wanted to, for those of you who do remember, how far we've come by thanking Nancy Lurie for putting this together. If we could have just a round of applause for Nancy, because literally, she makes the operations happen. I wanted to start with, where's my little clicker thing? Okay. Asking you guys what you think NDF really is. I mean, every time we come up here, we talk about NDF as a nonprofit. It was founded in 2006. It was an organization that was started, like so many other rare disease organizations, from the love of a mother for her daughter out of one tiny little zip code, happened to be Beverly Hills, 90210. But nevertheless, it was one tiny little zip code. And we used to think back then that it was a Persian Jewish disease because that's all we knew. And for about 8 or 9 years, they raised money and awareness among their own community in Los Angeles and raised about $1 million that they saved and funded clinical research, which is how all nonprofits start out in rare disease. You know, just let's pay the scientists to make this go away. But then they decided that they needed to sort of elevate their research, and we ended up expanding the universe. And in the last 4 or 5 years, we've realized that this is, obviously, look around you, not a Persian Jewish disease. It actually impacts people of all walks and races. And it impacts people, we used to think, in their late teens to their early 50s. Just today, I was made aware of a patient as young as 14. So we have a lot to understand about this disease still. However, we have come an incredibly long way. And really, I would say the thing that we're the most proud of is the fact that we've pulled together a group of scientists that are beyond reproach. They are more than what we could have expected. While we used to only work with Hadassah, Dr. Argov, and Stella Rosenbaum, to who we are very grateful for discovering the gene. We've really come a long way in terms of being able to build on that understanding and to coalesce scientists that were previously working in silos, forcing them to work together, forcing them to collaborate. And we've really become more successful at that, let's face it, because we ended up raising $2.5 million last year, and we're on goal to raise $3 million this year. And I'll tell you what, when you have the funding, you get to call some of the shots, right, scientists? So the truth of the matter is that I think that at the end of the day, what NDF really is an organization that is here to support its patients. And our mission is obviously to elevate the lives of those who live with it while funding, through our 3 programs, clinical research, but also education and awareness. And of course, finally, advocacy, which I believe is everything we do is advocacy. So, you know, from having days like this to being able to reach out and support patients, as well as being able to bring it all together and build on that foundation. What we really do, in fact, is to identify new patients, identify scientists that work in this arena, bring them together, and unify the G&E myopathy community. God knows there's precious few of us to begin with, and there is no room in this universe for ego-driven, selfish-driven, or separate causes. Anybody here seen The Life of Brian knows what I'm talking about, where there's a faction of people who want to overthrow the Roman government, and the only people they hate more than the Romans are each other. The Popular Front of Judea versus the Judean Popular Front. That's how I feel every time in a tiny rare disease community I find 2 or 3 different organizations working independently. We want to make sure that never happens. Everybody who is working on G&E myopathy is welcome in our community, and we do things by consensus. What we basically do is, first and foremost, we represent the patients and their families, caregivers, their families. Those are the people for whom we work. We bring together donors out of the relationships from the patients. Really, let's face it, nobody's going to donate to this cause unless you're somehow impacted by it or a stakeholder. That means everyone in this room is basically a stakeholder. And then with the money that we raise, we're able to fund science. And with the science that we create and learn and develop, we can then attract industry. Because at the end of the day, none of this will mean anything if we get stuck at a phase 1 trial and can't take it all the way to market. So while we have been doing a really, really good job of raising enough money to get us to a phase 1 trial, even in gene therapy at $5 million, which is my attorney and board chair, Ralph, always reminds me that's not enough money. We need more money. But even if we get it to that point, it's going to take $100 million to get gene therapy all the way to market. And that can only be done in tandem with industry. So we're very grateful to those of you here from the industry, people like Ledient, Ultragenyx, who have been there for us, who have been there for you, working on developing a drug for us. So we're very, very fortunate in that area. The next point is that really we do how we operate. We used to start saying that education and outreach was sort of our goal that we had missed. We were only focusing on clinical research. So we set about creating events like this. This is our 6th one that we're doing, and we've taken the show on the road. I hope you guys agree that this is more effective, I hope. And what we've tried to do is to correlate the visits to the patients. We're taking the show on the road. We're a lot more nimble than a lot of our patients. So we're really not holding anything in Los Angeles this year. Instead, we're bringing it here to Philadelphia. We've already had one event in the Ivory Coast this year. I mean, who knew? We had patients in the Ivory Coast. We're going to be having another one in Tel Aviv on May 29th. And then we're going to be going to India and meeting with our Indian patients and another sister organization in India on June 3rd. And hopefully we will also be able to have another one this year in Italy, where we do have quite a few patients. And then next year, pull the rest of Asia together, maybe do something in Hong Kong, or Japan for the South Asians. So we really are hoping that this works. Because with our patient days, we bring everyone together. This is an opportunity for you to meet each other. If you're scientists, to work with each other in collaboration. As Nancy mentioned, this afternoon we're going to do breakout sessions. Patients get together, support one another, but also caregivers. Who takes care of the caregiver? You know, and that's something that we really want to pay attention to, that the caregivers have to be there, have to be strong, and have to be supported just as much. So these are things that can happen. And we do a lot of travel and educational scholarships to make sure that people can actually afford to come to these events, because that's a really huge deal. Your feedback is always welcome, but another thing that I think we do and have done reasonably well is allowing and empowering the patients to have patient-led patient huddles where none of us are privy to the discussions, but connecting patients worldwide through the miracle of technology, allowing them to speak about things that affect their daily lives in a practical sense, and having then other kinds of webinars where we bring in guest speakers, people like the NIH, people like our team from Yale, doctors, physicians, anyone they want to hear from, and make it so that from the comfort of their home, they can really have access to the latest information. And what we've done is, I don't know if we have anyone here from the Neurology magazine yet, Elizabeth Katz, I'm not sure she's here, but we, one of the things that we hear the most in terms of having difficulty for patients is how long it takes to get diagnosis. And so we really paid attention to that and now have an arrangement with a neurology publication that is going to be launched and is in your bags, where we put a 3-page spread together with the help of Dr. Angela Lack, explaining to every single neurologist in this country to whom it's going to be distributed what G&E myopathy is, what the symptoms look like, and how they can identify it, and where they can go if they have questions. So hopefully these are all things that are slightly impactful in a meaningful way that help us empower our patients. In short, it's all about the patients. In short, it's about empowering them. And what we've done is gone outside of the normal events in which we host episodic relationships with the patients. Instead, we've brought them into our fold. If we have a need to hire someone, and by the way, there's only 2.5 people full-time at NDF right now, but people like Tara and Amy, who are invaluable to us, we bring them into the fold to the degree that we're able to pay them. We want to do that every time we look for a new person to hire. We look first within our G&EM community of patients who are talented, educated, informed, engaged, and impassioned, and that's the first place we look. So that's something that I think is a no-brainer for us to be able to do. We also want to try and identify patients early, so we have genetic screenings and pre-family planning events that we're going to be doing, perhaps one in Los Angeles in August. We'll discuss that. But you should know that prevention is something that we're going to be focusing on. And I'm not sure if people all feel good about the word prevention, but I have to tell you that should you choose not to pass this gene on, it is absolutely possible today with technology. So there's no need to have any further children come into this world with it. Should that be your discussion? That's something we can talk about. Dr. Ackler is here. He'd be happy to talk about that, and I can also forward you more information on that if that's of interest. But at the end of the day, what we are doing that I think serves multiple purposes, like taking the show on the road, where we can also assemble patients, collect samples. Instead of making these 2 or 3 separate events, we're trying to coalesce all of these things so that we have a cluster of wins at each one of these events. Another thing that we're doing is having our patients lead the process of creating the world's largest database of patients, by patients, and for patients, because at the end of the day, that is one thing that biotech and industry cannot do on their own and desperately will need, and it can be a big bargaining chip for us when the time comes to get a biotech to pay attention to us. Because at the difficulty that most people don't appreciate is biotechs who are working on gene therapy within the muscle sector are few and far between. Maybe there's a handful, and we're talking to all of them right now. We're engaging with all of them. But at the end of the day, we don't want to be just another nonprofit that's walking to them, cap in hand, begging them to work on our disease. We need to empower ourselves, raise the money, go with money and data and a plan, and say we're going to mitigate your potential losses if you work on our disease. Please provide us guidance now, and if and when we get to phase 1 and everything is a go, take the ball and run with it, and we want that assurance now. So that's our strategy, that's our plan. We're always willing to hear from you guys in terms of what you think we should be doing. But of course, the most effective and biggest chunk of our finances goes towards clinical research, which is our 3rd program. And you're going to hear a lot today about what we're doing from someone I can't even believe I have to pinch myself that we have Dr. Monkol Lek and Dr. Angela Lek as our scientific directors working with us from Yale. There couldn't be anybody that made me more proud. And what they do, you're going to meet Dr. Lek himself. He himself is a patient of limb-girdle, so comes from not only an incredible scientific background, but has a real sensitivity to patient-centric behavior. And that really means more than you can perhaps fathom at this time. We want to, and you'll be hearing from him why everything that we are working on right now is to support 2 things only. The only treatment that's underway right now is MANAC, which the NIH is working on. And Nancy Parsons, could you stand up? I want everyone to see Nancy Parsons from Leadiant, which is the money and force behind MANAC. A round of applause for Leadiant. Thank you for being here. And I also want to say that while we invited her to come and speak to you, and you're going to hear from her, they also cut us a check in support of this event. So I mean, this is the kind of fellowship that we've created. But the reason that every single piece of research you're going to hear about, and hopefully Monko will put a finer point on this, is going to support at least one of those two treatments, either manic or gene therapy. If you guys have another idea, bring it to us, and we will run through that door as well. But those are the two options we have at the moment. So we're going to expedite a treatment. We're going to get an IND for gene therapy. That's our goal for this year. And persuade a biotech to agree to take it to market should everything go as planned. And we have committed $750,000 in research this year, with $3 million earmarked for gene therapy. That means all the studies that support the IND. If there's any confusion about that process and why it takes so long and how it works, I promise you, by the end of the day, if you still have questions, please come to me. But we can only expedite the things we can expedite. Science moves at its own pace. And while I want to make sure everyone feels hopeful, I need to manage your expectations in terms of realistic expectations of the timeline. People say, well, when is gene therapy going to start? That's my most frequently asked question. And I tell them it already started. It started in 2017 when we began the pre-IND process with Nationwide Children's Hospital. Dr. Jerry Mendel led that. And we basically came back, the FDA came back with a list of questions, as I understand is normal. And we're going to hear from Dr. Paul Martin later and Kelly Harden about that process. But essentially, they came back with a list of questions that we had to answer. And in order to answer those questions, we had to fund some of the studies that we're working on today. So it's all underway. When you have to think about the fact that while I understand patients can be impatient, when you're talking about something like gene therapy that can only be done once in a lifetime on each patient, we want to make sure we're dosing patients with the right thing. It would be absolutely unconscionable to me to have a patient dosed with something just out of scientific curiosity or just in order to speed things up to make it look as if we're doing something. And while that in some ways might be tempting for even some scientists, that is something that I consider primarily my role as an advocate to prevent that kind of thing from happening, even if it means being yelled at by all of you. So I just want to basically remind you guys that we're working as fast as we can, as hard as we can, with the smartest people we can find, and we will have a solution here very soon. So the only last thing I want to leave you with, as you listen to the scientists today presenting, that I have 3 questions that I ask on behalf of you every time I talk to a scientist. And they hate this, by the way. My first question is, why should we fund your proposal? What problem does it solve? If it doesn't expedite treatment, either manic or gene therapy, and it's just because of scientific curiosity or something out there in left field, by scientific discourse and consensus, we basically say no. How long will it take? Because that's the question I get asked. When will we have these mice? When will we know what we can do with the next step? So I have to have that question answered, and I beseech you to think about that today while the scientists are making their presentations. And the third question is, obviously, how much will it cost? Sometimes some of the things, we had a proposal for somebody who claimed they had an answer to gene therapy and they wanted $5 million for it upon further review. And we would love nothing more, by the way, for a straight package deal to come to us, just hand me $5 million and we'll give you the solution. That didn't turn out to be true. So we couldn't afford to do that or even look into it. So these are the questions I implore you to be thinking of yourselves when you have the opportunity to hear from our scientists as they make their presentations today. I also want to let you guys know that I am always available to you. My door is always, always open, 24/7. You can email me at lwelsh@curehibm.org. You can send me sensitive information. I will not share it, but I will get back to you right away. And if there's anything, any suggestions that you have, we are always receptive. In fact, begging you to tell us how we can serve you better, because at the end of the day, when we have a cure, when we have a treatment, we will probably close up shop and go home and let Amy and Tara run the show in terms of support for our existing patients. But we have one goal, we're very serious about it, and we really hope that what we do is pleasing to all of you.